Hello everyone and welcome to our AeroAstro question and answer with NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli, who will be joining us live from the International Space Station. We're going to connect with Jasmin via video link in a few minutes, and I thought I'd start with some introductions now because, well, basically Jasmin will know this about herself, so that would be redundant given that time on a satellite link with the ISS is kind of at a premium. So I'm Stephen Barrett, I'm head of the Aeronautics and Astronautics Department. I know most of you here, and it's good, thank you for coming. And this is AeroAstro PhD student Andrea Henshall, who is a co-host for this event with me, and also a retired major in the US Air Force. Andrea, I understand you actually know Jasmin from recent years.
I do, that's correct. Hi, everyone. My partner, Ron, was in the same helicopter squadron in the Marine Corps as she was, and so they've known each other for several years now. So when I met Ron, I was the second MIT graduate that he knew, Jasmin being the first. So he told each of us about the other person back in 2015, and we got to cheer her on as she was, prepared herself for the selection board, was accepted, and went through training. I didn't get to interact with her directly until 2019, but because Jasmin and I are both service members, we really wanted to open this up to the veteran community here at MIT. So I'll be asking some of the questions that they've submitted. And thank
Fantastic.
You for
thank you so much. So that's really great. And Jasmin is an AeroAstro alum. She graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in 2005. From there, she went to the Naval Postgraduate School to earn a Master's in Science, and then went on to become a Super Cobra pilot in the Marines, where she earned the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. She flew over 150 combat missions before becoming a test pilot, amassing some 2,000 flight hours in 25 different aircraft. In 2017, Jasmin was accepted into the NASA Astronaut cadet class known as Astronaut Group 22, or the Turtles, for reasons I have no clue, but anyway, there it is. That was along with Woody Hoberg, who some of you also know, another alum of this department. Jasmin went to Johnson Space Center for training, and in March 2022, she was assigned as commander for NASA's SpaceX Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station. The mission launched from the ISS, to the ISS from NASA Johnson last August, and she's been there ever since, so that's a long stint off planet. Jasmin is a flight engineer on the ISS as well as the mission commander. She completed one spacewalk along with Laurel O'Hara last November. It was only the fourth ever all-woman spacewalk. So, pretty accomplished person, I think you'll probably agree. And we're just incredibly thrilled that she's willing to join us from space here today. And this is some of her very precious free time on the ISS. With that, I think we're ready to connect with Jasmin. And just as an FYI, the way this is set up, you will see Jasmin, but she won't be able to see us. And also there'll be a couple of short outages in communication with the ISS, which is something to do with rearranging solar arrays or something like that, which I don't think we fully track, but that's the technical reason for it. So I think we see Jasmin now. Jasmin, are we coming in clear? Maybe not.
She might be the one to initiate the...
Yeah, we might be waiting for her. I'm impressed that Jasmin packed MIT swag to take to the International Space Station. This is some foresight. Well, it's funny you say that the Houston would have been Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? Because the original planned headquarters was now the Volpe Center, or the old Volpe Center. So, almost. Jasmin, can you hear us?
I have you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Fantastic, we can hear you. And just so everyone knows, there'll be a slight time delay, and we can't do much about the speed of light. We had that discussion, and despite your course on quantum optics, that's not something we can address. So, Jasmin, anyway, sorry about that. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for doing this, and we really, really appreciate it at MIT AeroAstro. I'm Stephen Barrett. I'm the AeroAstro department head. Started here in 2010, but actually was here as an exchange student in 2004 or 5 when you were here, so we probably overlapped at some point in the now distant past. And I'm also here with Andrea Henshall, who you know.
Hi, Jasmine. It is amazing to get to talk to you while you're on the ISS. And your friend from Scarface, Ronnie, he's listening in as well. He says hello and hopes that you were able to pack some M&Ms.
Well, I know we only have you for a little while.
Great to be talking to all of you. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I know we only have you for a little while, so we'll jump right into the community's questions. So when you were an undergrad, what did you think your future looked like, and how did that change as life went on?
So when I was an undergrad, I hoped my future looked very much like it ended up looking. I first attended MIT knowing I was probably going to join the military. I didn't know which branch at the time, but that was something I intended to do from the outset. And I wanted to be an astronaut and do this since I was just a little girl. So I hoped my future looked like this. I will say that my experience in undergrad at times definitely made me question that this outcome was possible. So it definitely put some doubt in my mind, but okay. And I think we're gonna lose you here in a second.
So I think this is our first 30-second interlude, so imagine some calming elevator music playing as
Can you sing? I can't sing.
no, I mean, that would be terrifying.
The astronauts get to take a wake up to this every day.
Really?
I've heard that.
If Jeff is here. Yeah. So now I realize the first gap was the first outage, so I think this would be the second and last one probably, but we'll see.
Jasmin actually took Unified in this room. I don't know if you guys realize this.
But the old version of
The
this
old
room.
version of this room.
The old version of Unified.
All right, it looks like we're
Okay, I think I have you back now. Do you hear me?
We do.
We do, yeah. So the next question is a combination of them. First of all, how did your journey to becoming an astronaut differ from being in the military versus somebody who is a civilian? And then what is your opinion on the importance of having a PhD for someone who's interested in applying?
So generally, at least in the last few selections, how NASA has selected people, they've broken up into about 5 groups. Military jet pilots, flight test engineers, scientists, engineers, and medical doctors. And so as they're looking at applicants, they're kind of looking at them in those specific groups. And I think generally they're looking, I mean, now we all serve doing the same job. You know, I'm doing the same job as my engineer friend astronauts are doing, as my scientist astronaut friends are doing, as my doctor friend astronauts are doing. So they're looking for the same things, but how those present in those career paths might be a little different. And so, you know, for someone like me who's a military aviator, they're maybe looking more at my operational experience. My test pilot background certainly helped. Whereas for a scientist, maybe they're looking for, you know, that PhD might give a little more of a boost. PhD is not required to do this job. There are plenty of people in the astronaut office who don't have a PhD, myself included, and also several civilian astronauts. But it is, it's certainly not going to hurt to have a PhD, and it shows your strength in that field.
This one's from undergrad Trey, who says, I was working on SpaceX's mission control during your sims and liftoff flight. How was the ride in Dragon, and what was the hardest part of the flight sims?
It was awesome. That's cool that you were there at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne. So first off, if you were in mission control tray, you probably know we didn't actually know we were launching until the last minute because you all were troubleshooting, but we did in fact launch. And I'll say the first stage was so smooth with the 9 engines. It was powerful. You knew, I mean, those G's were building, but it was so smooth. I expected there to be more rumbling, more vibrations. And then when that cut out, that was probably my favorite part, when the first stage cut out and you're weightless for a moment. And then the second stage with the single engine was like, that was more of a rumble, kind of like I was expecting, in a slow build up in those G's. And then when the second stage cut out, and we were in orbit and weightlessness, I just felt like I was hanging in my straps. As far as the sims, I think the hardest part, Dragon is a very autonomous spacecraft. And if everything goes as expected, I'm not doing anything. My pilot's not really doing anything except for monitoring the systems and being ready to step in as needed. And that, I think, is the hardest part, because I come from a background where I flew attack helicopters, and you're constantly in the loop and engaged. Staying engaged and making sure you know what the vehicle systems are doing and you understand what it's doing and what it should be doing is actually, I think, a lot more challenging than just being hands-on the entire time.
I think that also means Trey did a good job in mission control, so that's good. So here's another one related to training and sims. Did you or do you use VR, AR, XR in training or in the ISS? And if so, how does VR, AR, XR impact motion sickness in zero-G on the ISS? And what is the experience with zero-G and motion sickness like?
So before I started training for this mission, when I was working on lunar landers and working on training for that, we were definitely looking into especially augmented reality solutions for training. I will say training for this mission, the space station mission, did not involve a lot of VR, AR, or XR. However, we do sometimes use it up here. For example, when we exercise, we're scheduled for exercise 2.5 hours a day. One of our exercise devices is a stationary bike. And our European colleagues, ESA, provided a virtual reality headset for my crewmate Andy to test, but the rest of us have been using it as well. And it's just it takes you on a bike ride. I went on one on a Danish beach recently, but there are different paths you can take. And so we have started using it for that. And I know our psychology team back on Earth is definitely looking at it for long duration missions and connection to family and things like that. For your second question, I think was related to zero-G and motion sickness. Mm-hmm. I was pretty lucky. I did not get much motion sickness at all. And it seems to be hit or miss. It's not very predictable who feels sick and who doesn't. Sometimes, these military jet pilots come up here and feel sick for a few days, and it just seems to be random. And so, yeah, I was just pretty lucky in that regard.
Awesome.
Well, I've got to ask the question, Jasmin. What made you pick the Marine Corps over a branch like the Air Force?
Hey.
You would ask that, Andrea. So, as I said, I knew I wanted to join the military. I didn't necessarily know which branch early on. I don't even know that I knew what the Marine Corps was, when I was in high school. But eventually what led me there, each branch has a slightly different personality or persona. And the Marines were the, hard charging. They take extreme pride in everything they do, and their, every detail of their uniform. And that was just something I wanted to be a part of. And also, I believe it was my junior year of college, I went to the career fair at MIT, and I spoke to a couple of the different branches. And the Marine Corps, at the time at least, offered a guaranteed air contract from the start, and you go into officer candidate school between while you were in college during the summers. And so I knew I wanted to fly, so that was also something I couldn't pass up. And once I went to Marine Corps officer candidate school, there was no way I was going any other branch.
Well, I can't argue with those reasons. So I've got a few questions here. What made you want to become an astronaut? What do you feel were the most important steps you took towards your goal? And then being where you are now, how does it feel to look back on that path?
Okay, I try to remember all those questions, but starting with, now what was the first one?
What made you decide you wanted to be an astronaut?
Okay, so that I think also kind of varied over time. As a kid in elementary school, it sounded exciting and adventurous. The thought of exploring places we've never been seemed really cool. And then, as I got older and became interested in flying, and I went to space camp. I saw a shuttle launch. I even got to visit Johnson Space Center, and meet some of the astronauts. And I've always been drawn. I've always played team sports, and NASA is, space exploration requires an incredible level of teamwork and working together when you're solving the types of problems you are to enable space exploration, especially human space exploration. And I just love that. And I think I genuinely believe what we're doing is very, very important, and the technologies we develop up here help us back on Earth and are incredibly important.
I think everyone in this room agrees with that sentiment too. So we've got one here from Professor Ollie Dweck, who sent in a question and is here in person watching you. You took Unified Engineering in 2002 to 3, which I suppose you could say is a character building experience from your earlier remarks. That's almost 20 years ago. What did you learn in Unified that is still useful for you today?
Hello, Ali. And Sam says hello as well, by the way. I don't even remember all the subjects that were in Unified. And after MIT, I went into the military and didn't use that engineering side really for 10 years until I went on to become a test pilot and started using it again. So it wasn't the details of the coursework that is what carried with me. But what I learned in Unified that was so important was resilience and teamwork. I could not have gone through Unified or MIT in general without working with my classmates. And that is something I applaud MIT for so much, is that it's not people aren't trying to cut each other down. People are constantly helping one another. At least when I was there, I hope it's the same. And that, to me, is such an important thing to learn, how much more we can do when we work together. There were times I was able to help someone, and there were times other people were helping me. And I think that just brings everyone up. And then resilience. MIT, I'm not going to lie, it was incredibly challenging for me. Of all the things I've done in my life, graduating from MIT was probably the hardest one. And so learning that I could fail and keep going and eventually get to my goal, those were the types of things that actually stuck with me.
That's amazing. So kind of along those lines, what advice would you give to young women who are interested in a career in space exploration?
I think first I'll just say something I would tell anyone interested in a career in space exploration. As I mentioned earlier, space exploration is extremely challenging. And I don't think I even fully appreciated it, even when I first got to NASA. But just being up here, living and working, we've had people living on the International Space Station for nearly 25 years continuously. And yet still every single day, the mission controls around the world are solving problems that are critical to keeping us living and working up here. And then the other thing for, young women specifically, we're moving in the right direction. We have a lot more opportunities than we did 50 years ago, even than we did 10 years ago. But there is still a ways to go. If you were just to look at our office, for example, there's only been one chief of the astronaut office that wasn't a man. And I think that's predominant in a lot of these fields where we're starting to get more and more to those management positions, but there still is a ways to go. And I think something I would say is, in order to affect change and positive change, you need to gain and earn respect first. And so what I would say is initially earn that trust and respect, and then use it to make things better for the next women coming and the next generation.
I love that message so much. So speaking of the next generation, what do your little girls think about you being in space?
I get to video chat with them once a week, and it depends. Some weeks they're like, "Mommy, we want to come to space to see you," and some weeks they're like, "Mommy, don't come back." They're only 3, my little girls, so it's sometimes hard to know what they think. But this weekend, when I talked to them, they probably counted down from 10 to liftoff about 20 times, playing with they made rockets out of their magnet tiles. So they definitely are very aware that I'm up on the space station. They understand so much more than you would think a 3-year-old would. And so it's cool to have them know so much about space already.
What's it like being commander of the mission on the ISS? And could you give us an example of leadership that's unique in this environment, and how did you prepare to be a commander of this mission?
I think in terms of leadership styles, I would say my leadership style from the Marine Corps to here, I learned a lot about leadership, I think, from my time even at MIT, being captain of the basketball and lacrosse teams, and then to the Marine Corps, and then coming here. But how that's implemented maybe changes. NASA is quite a different organization than the Marine Corps is. But at the end of the day, for me, leadership is about knowing who you're working with, respecting and valuing them, and working to earn that trust and respect from them, and learning people's strengths and weaknesses, what they care about, what makes them tick, all those things. I think it's all about leadership. To me, just comes down to the people you're working with.
So the Marine Corps obviously has a lot of traditions. One of our Marines, Cameron, brought up your celebration of the Marine Corps birthday. Can you talk a little bit about bringing traditions, rituals, and other comforts from home to space?
Yes, and I will answer this question. I might lose you in the middle of it.
I think we just lost comms. So I'm afraid that's it. We ran out at 3:40 of our communications window, so we'll pass on your thanks, but thank you all for joining us for this event.